Okay, whoop. Everybody. Caught me off guard. Sort of sizing up this mallet here. Wondering if I really need it. Last night I had a wonderful experience with a film. I think you're going to have one too. And it made me wonder, do I need the mallet for this or not? Now, this film that we're talking about, this 1966 film, did have some kind of, trance-like experience upon me. Not like Mesa of Lost Women. Ooh, remember that. Mesa of Lost Women, we needed the mallet. Good time, right? Take yourself out of the stupor. But this one here, the trance that you might be put into is really created by the mood of this wonderful, fantastic film. And I'm really waxing very heavily into this film because I think it's one of the best films that we have to offer you. Now, let's talk a little bit about titles. We sometimes talk about titles here and find some significance in titles. Here's one that, don't let that title scare you off. The Italian version of this title was Operation Fear. Operation Fear. Ugh. Kind of a dumb title. In the United States, when it was released, it was called Kill, Baby, Kill. Yee. Sounds like one of those, biker chick flicks. Matter of fact, when I first got this film, I was thinking, I'm looking forward to that, on the hogs and stuff like that. No, you don't get that. Forget that. The title, throw it out. What you have here is one of Mario Bava's best films. Matter of fact, I would put this up with Black Sunday and Black Sabbath. It's a wonderfully photographed film. He did the photography on this along with a guy named Fortini. But remember, when you have a photographer's name up there, a cinematographer's name on the credits, a lot of times that's a cover. I mean, those guys, were working on the set, but Bava, he's a painter at heart. He can't leave that camera alone. And I was just reading some stuff, some interviews with him, and one of the things he talked about was that he was a painter as a child. He wanted to be a painter, and he considers his films that he works with extensions of his painting. And therefore, he is always working with the imagery. Let's talk a little bit about this movie. The plot of this film, a lot of times we talk about Bava and about the plot doesn't mean much. Well, this is a good one. It's not a complicated one. It's basically, in a way, kind of a lift from, and I don't know if I want to call it a lift, but it reminds me of some of the better Mexican horror films to come out in the early 60s, late 50s. Films that deal with the idea of a collision of mindsets. Old world, new world. The old world of superstition and the new world of science. The plot involves this CSI type of autopsy guy, who's called in to inspect some weird killings. And he stumbles into a world of superstition where people do strange things. Some of the mythology here in the background of showing the superstition of these people is quite marvelous to see. And he has to try to figure this out. No help from the town people. In a way, it's sort of like high noon. He's sort of brought in and he's all alone. He has to stand against these forces of evil. I'm not going to talk about the forces of evil in this film because I want you to discover them. Very interestingly laid out what he has to run into. What I would like to talk about is the imagery of this film. The imagery of this film is fantastic. If Dario Argento in Suspiria had to find a model from which he used gathered his use of unmotivated color, which you found very well in Suspiria, the reds and the greens and the blues used in places where they do not belong, bathing the imagery. This is the film that could be the template for that. What gives this film its nightmarish, otherworldly quality, particularly as it moves further and deeper into the narrative, is this use of bathing sets and characters in strange blues and greens and reds. Beautiful. Likewise, typical of Bava, fantastic flowing mobile camera movement. Very few rapid zooms, which he'd become more known for later. There are a couple in here. But more mobility, tracking about through the landscapes. Soundtrack is used really well in this film too. Now, I think about nightmare on film. There are very few films that capture that sense of nightmare. I think of things like Andalusian Dog. I think of things like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I think of things like The Night of the Living Dead. I think of things like Suspiria. I think of things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think of things like Vampire. I think of things like Nosferatu. All of these things capture nightmare on film in various ways. And one of the ways that people think of horror films too is that there are two types of horror films. The horror film that terrifies, that shocks you, the hand on the shoulder, sort of the Pavlovian dog approach. And then the other that creates the world of dread. Vampire by Dreyer, for instance, is a good example that doesn't go for the shock hand on the shoulder. It creates an atmosphere of dread. That's where its nightmare is. This film fits there as well. There are no real hands on the shoulder jumping out at you, scaring you. It creates a fabric of terror, a fabric of dread, let's say, more likely. A fabric of, after I was done watching this film, I felt very uneasy. My night of sleep was uneasy. You can talk to my wife. It takes a lot, when it comes to a horror film, to disturb me. This one did. Marvelous film. I think you're going to have a great time with this. This has got to be one of the best films that we have shown. In a way, it would have been great to show it with Suspiria, because the two share so much in common. Now, the thing with Suspiria, remember, it assaulted you soundtrack-wise. Hopefully when you watch that film, you turn your soundtrack up and let those the Goblin soundtrack just beat on you. This one here, it seeps into the pores of your skin. It becomes a part of you. The nightmare builds and builds. Don't get up and eat a sandwich in the middle of this thing. Take it all in one large time period. Let it build. And I guarantee you, you're going to experience something that is very rare in cinema as far as I'm concerned. Total control. Mario Bava has total control of us. Now, I'd like to end on a little bit of a note. I was just looking at something. And there's a little snippet of a quote that I found from Mario Bava that kind of fits this film to a little bit. He says, "My fantasies are always horrible. For example, I love my young daughter more than anything else in the world, but when I dream of her, it's always frightening." Now think of that in regards to this film and what it's going to be about. I think you can make the connection. Do you want to know what character is haunting my subconscious? A violinist who serenades the woman he loves by playing on the tendons of his arms. Whoa. A violinist who plays on the tendons of his arms. Now that is very Clive Barker-like, and it shows you where Mario Bava is. A man of horror and dread. Roll 'em, Smokey.